Welcome to another video with me, your host, Kieran a Scam, Kieran a Sham, Kieran, he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. Yes, 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 yes! Oh, come on! Yes! Today I wanted to talk about the fact that I don't really know what I'm talking about, which I think is a good subject to delve into, because this very format, this very means of communicating, the YouTubes, the video format, the bedroom talker is kind of the thing that just goes around mostly on YouTube when it comes to commentary. Like it's rarely some a smart person that'll come and goes, well, on the one hand we have this situation, and on the other hand we have this other situation. It's very difficult to tell what is true, what is not true. I think we should investigate, take our time, be patient. That's not what you get, is it? You get, well, I think that she was like so unfair. The beauty community is completely destroyed. You shouldn't be dating anyone under this age. I get it. We want to talk about stuff, and we want to. It's important to actually communicate, and it's important to get your message across to an extent. But a lot of the time, none of us really know what we're talking about. Like, it's just opinions. And I wanted to go explain quickly my own journey to how I discover my opinions and how I think that I know that I'm right, and how I suspect that I might not be entirely right, or how I start suspecting that I might be wrong. So today I wanted to talk about deduction. That sounded like Tabascus. I want to talk about how I deduce things. So the current way of coming to a conclusion that is currently accepted by a lot of people, by a lot of adults, people who have thought about how do we get to the right answer for quite a while, is something akin to the scientific method. You got to observe, you have to gather some information, and then eventually you come to a conclusion. So you can't just pull things out your ass. We need evidence. Our courts are made this way and all that stuff. The problem is that in a world that is increasingly connected, and there's more and more sources of information out there, it's very hard to know who's telling the truth or who's just wrong. Or maybe they're not trying to deceive you on purpose. They just don't know better. And so the way that I do it is I deduce things. I look at the world and I make up a image of how it should be in my head. If this thing is true, and 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 this thing is true, this thing is true, and this thing is true, and this thing is true, shit. If this thing is true, and this thing is true, this thing is true, and over there that thing is true, and this thing is true, and this thing is true, and that thing is true. If all these things are true, then we must come to a conclusion that assumes all these things work together, right? This is how science is supposed to work. It's supposed to be like, well, we look at all the evidence, and whatever fits all the evidence is the right answer, right? So I just do the same thing, but I do it in my mind. So I look at, for instance, I'll take a random example. Okay, contentious subject maybe, COVID, because it's the most recent big scale thing that could concern everyone, and is a rather important thing we should talk about. The COVID virus appeared end of 2019. Went on through all 2020 up to 2021. And the way that the coronavirus pandemic was handled was really, I'm not talking about the political handling, I'm talking about just the way that it was perceived is completely terrible, because first of all, we had different sources of information, medical sources of information. Now there's information coming that the people who are in charge of leading the efforts against the coronavirus had a hand in creating it as well. This is what I'm doing right now. This is a speculation, what you call speculation, where it is not too sure what's true, what's not true. We don't know, but we can talk about it. We can put the idea out there, and we can go, I'm not too sure, but I'm hearing a lot of different things. That's what I know. That's what I know, is that I hear a lot of different things, and nothing seems to be working together. However, people keep forgetting the coronavirus is a problem that has a context. what is this context? The context of the human condition, us. So now you have to wonder, well, what society do we live in? We live in a capitalist society. We live in a society that has a focus on making money. So now we know that's a thing, okay? You've built up this understanding that the world works a lot on money, and so it makes sense that the coronavirus pandemic must be seen through a lens of money as well. So that's one of the lenses you have to see that pandemic through. When you look at politics, and you look at how politicians have behaved over the years, how they've made promises, they break promises, why would you still be believing the politicians? That's what my question is. Why are you believing the politicians? Second lens we have to view things through, a political one. That these people are liars, and so why would you believe anything that they say? There's no point. You could believe what they say, but specifically you would have to know why you believe what they say. You would have to go, well, I read in this newspaper that was true. I read in this newspaper that this was true. I read that were true, that were true, and now I have a context for what that politician is saying. But you can't actually believe what they say directly. So what's even the point of listening to the politician? Because the politician assumes that you are going to just believe them just for no reason. Like, look, I'm just going to be a right-wing politician. I think that liberty is important. I think that everybody should have the right to do what they want, to put whatever substance they want in their body. Can I get it? Can I get a hell yeah? All right. I don't think they would say, can I get a hell yeah? I mean, if they did, they'd be dorky as fuck. Now I'm going to be a right-wing politician. Sorry, now I'm going to be a left-wing politician. I think that we should all accept each other, and we should try to help each other as much as possible. Be accepting of all types of people all over the world. It's inexcusable. I'm starting to have this AOC vibe now. It's inexcusable. It's inexcusable to have this perspective that we can just be selfish. And you know what? We should drag them down to the voting ballots. Something like that. I don't know, whatever. To the voting ballots? To the voting balls. My point is, it's not hard to identify what makes someone left-wing and what makes someone right-wing on any issue, really, as long as you just get to understand the way that they think in general and the way that the party thinks. So why would you believe anything they say? Boom. A third way to be seeing the coronavirus pandemic is as a science way, like the actual science behind it. Are the doctors, even if they're doing their best and they're making vaccines for us, how do we know that they didn't miss some part of the picture, or that there's something they don't understand about viruses in general? And now we take a step back. We see the human condition. Humans can make mistakes, first of all. So why do you believe everything that you see everywhere? You can't really believe for sure. You have to deduce always yourself. This is what I call thinking for yourself. It's taking your time and gathering information, right? I deduce the truth from everything that works at the same time. If you give me a piece of information that conflicts with something that someone else has already told me, I don't either assume you're right and they're wrong, or you're full of shit, you're wrong, and they're right. I don't just go, it's either one or the other. There is a way to make all these pieces of information work together. And that way includes they're full of shit, but it could also be many other things. And I want to lead into something that I've been working on, which is something about physics. This is when it's hard to know if I don't know what I'm talking about, because the more you learn, the less you know. Really. Like, the more you learn, the more you realize, oh my God, I'm just scraping the tip of the iceberg of this particular field, of this particular field, of this particular. And it gets overwhelming very, very quickly. I've been working on some physics. And the domain of physics I've been exploring for about a few years now. Philosophy specifically. But what's important about the domain of physics is the context for everything that we know of. So your human emotions live within the physical context of physics. Now, you could argue against that. You could say, well, maybe emotions arose first, and this is something that I assumed actually at some point. I assumed that the subjective might be the first thing that appears, and then that the physical arises from the subject. And you could say that it's somewhat true. I mean, for instance, like I have a subjective point of view, I have a will, and I manifest this video. So you could say that I'm the one, the subject, this ethereal mystical, intangible thing is creating new physical data. In this case, in the form of zeros and ones, that I'm using the physical to manifest some new creation, a new physical creation. But if you go back to before computers were invented, it was the idea of the computer that manifested the computer. So then you can ask yourself, well, is it the chicken or the egg? Is it the subjective or the objective that came first? Personally, I don't think there's any one or the other that came first. I think they both are the same thing, and I think that's where the confusion is arising from, is that people will tend to choose either one or the other. The subjective, or the people who believe in the soul, who believe in God, who believe in magical, mystical things, and the people who are more Cartesian, who are more physical oriented, will believe in the physical, physics, biology, STEM field, science, technology, and electromagnetism, science, technology, engineering, mechanics. I think I have no idea. I don't know. You see, I don't know what I'm talking about. Don't believe me. Think for yourself. I've been exploring the physical world, and this has helped me a lot to put into context everything that is happening right now. So, for instance, there's the big debates that happen in biology about being transgender or not, or is that a thing, or the binary, or are there women or men, what is a man, what is a woman, yada yada. I had conversations with people, and one of my friends was like, it's only testosterone and estrogen, and he's not a biologist, but maybe, he's read some stuff, maybe it's true. So I listened to what he said, and that's like in my head now, and it's a floating idea. And if ever some other idea comes along and it's similar, and then bloop, they'll start sticking together, and I'll stick them all together, and eventually I'll get a proper idea. But my point is, I looked at the universe, and it really looks like the universe doesn't create anything perfect. The Earth is perfectly round? Wrong. It's not perfectly round. It's very, very close to perfectly round, but now that we're on the planet, we know it's not symmetrical. We can see it. From a human perspective, the Earth is not symmetrical. So there's always a moment where the symmetry, where the math, no matter how precise it is, should break down. This is known. This is a physicist said it the other day. Matt from PBS Spacetime. He said that. There's a moment where the wave mechanics of a puddle will break down because you are splashing the puddle too hard, and there's no more puddle, and there's no more wave mechanics. It'll start forming droplets, and it'll fly into the air, into the 3D space, right? From this, I can deduce, if there is no perfect system, that for the biology debate, that there should be no perfect binary either. You can deduce this. You don't need to do any research. You can just look at a field, the context, the physical context of our existences, which is mostly physics, right? Because physics is the deeper version of it. Biology will be the version that sits on top, that deals with us on our specific planet. If you fit these things together, you should assume suddenly, well, how did the binary arise? This is a question. How did the binary... And someone did send me something about how it arose, but a lot of the time when people send me stuff, it's not really what they think that I'm after. And they go, well, this is how it... So Kieran from the future here, what the guy on Twitter actually meant was he was talking about sexual dimorphism and how that was the explained binary, but actually dimorphism is the characteristics that follow from the separation into a binary, and not the actual binary itself. And this is where I lead into a little bit more into the physics. The world can only be made up of things that are made up of other things. Getting to the bottom of the world means absolutely nothing. You can't get to a fundamental anything. It's not possible. It's not possible. You have to think about it. I invite you to think about it for 3 seconds. Now I'm going to give you the answer. The idea of a thing is it is made by its world. If an object is made by its world, from what we can tell, at least everything that we have observed so far from our perspective, seems to be that the objects around us are made by the world, usually from smaller things, but not only. For instance, I can talk to you, you can talk to me, you influence how I think, how I interact, how I move, how I decide to spend my life, and this leads me to be a different person. So you are influencing me, and it's not just the small things that make me up physically, it's also you, this other you that is of the same order of magnitude of size as me, and you are influencing me. So the world influences the world. Now, when you get to the bottom, to the fundamental, what influenced the fundamental? You're always going to have that whole. What came before the Big Bang? What makes a field? Well, a field just exists. Don't you see where this is going? It's always the same thing. You always get to a point where you don't know what's happening anymore. And so I'm going to lead in to the 3 big flaws that I find that exist in physics today. The first one is 0. The second one is infinity. And the third one is universality. 0 is nothing. Nothing. We can debate about it for hours. I keep saying that, but really, nothing from a physical standpoint cannot exist. Because first comes the thing before you can define the nothing to the thing. Sally has 3 apples. She gives 3 to Tom. 3 apples to Tom. This is not a riddle. She has 3. What 3 did she give? She gives 3 apples to Tom. What has she left? Nothing. First comes the apple. Then comes the nothing. So the nothing is defined based on the thing that you know. So nothing to the universe, below the fundamental, is defined by the universe. So nothing is nothing, must be nothing to the universe. And that's the only thing we know. But it doesn't mean that it's nothing to itself. My point is, there comes a point where it is natural to assume that there will be levels that we do not detect. Levels beyond which we cannot see. And these levels will barely influence us. But they will influence the things that influence the things that influence the things that influence us. And it is natural to assume that it goes on forever. Because everything can only be a thing by being made, by being gradually created. A thing that just pops into existence makes 0 sense. It cannot pop into existence. Popping into existence from a 0 state to a 1 state, that's computers. I read this or heard this somewhere. There was a physicist criticizing the way the physics was moving forward. He was saying that in the time before computers, everyone was like, the universe is thermodynamics and is pressure and is all to do with entropy. And now we've got computers. It's all about computation and how probabilities are selected and functions and can't you see where this is going? We are adapting our vision of the universe to the tools that we newly have to inquire about the universe. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's the way it is. Infinity is that which we do not know. Infinity is the thing that goes beyond. We see a curve on a graph go up to infinity. And we have tools to discover if it actually goes to infinity or if it stops somewhere. But when we discover that it keeps going up, we assume it goes to infinity. But infinity just means we don't have the time, literally we do not have the time, to find out where it goes. Let's take a simple example. When you're zooming in on a graph, let's say you're in a world and you zoom in. You keep having numbers that replicate. First you see 1 and 2, and then you open it up, and then, whoa, there's 1.5 appears. And you open it up between the 1 and 1.5, there's 1.25. And then you go in between the middle, it's 1.12, 1.125. The numbers keep generating based on what you've created. You've created an algorithm that says, well, once I've zoomed into a certain amount, this number should appear. And so it is a gradual counting step. It's a gradual counting mechanism. So what you're forgetting is the counting. What you're forgetting is the zooming in. You're forgetting this action. This is an action. So infinity doesn't just exist. It exists because you make it. So you cannot from the beginning know about infinity. So you must accommodate for varying points of view to be able to get to anything. And then finally, we have universality. Universality is the understanding that there is a one thing to get to. But how do we know that there's a one thing to get to when all we've ever experienced is limited experience? That the world itself makes us, but the world itself is limited. We're made of carbon, we're made of phosphorus, we're made of water, we're made of these elements that were present to make us. The sun had to explode somewhere to make carbon, so that carbon could land on Earth. And once it gets to Earth, it can build in some way that is still a bit unclear, apparently, to biologists, but getting clearer by the century, getting clearer every day. My point is not about the exact process, because that I don't know about, but my point is about the context. There is no indication that a limited thing, a thing that is the sun, for instance, can create a certain amount of stuff given the properties that it will have, the amount of pressure, the amount of gravity, everything will lead to a specific element being made. It gets shot out, the earth gets created, this element lands on earth, there are meteorites everywhere, things build up, there's the primordial soup, somehow water appears on the planet, we grow into human beings today. We are limited by what came before us. So why do we think there's going to be an answer to the universe? A one answer that incorporates everything? This cannot be possible, because the things that make the universe are limited themselves. How could they possibly lead to something that will then lead to something that will lead to something that, and that final something at the very end, or not at the very end, but very, very far along the line compared to that first something that made the something that made the something that made the something that made the something. This something, how would it know how to understand this thing there? So the laws of physics that govern this thing should not be able to govern this thing. There should not be a law that is immutable, that exists forevermore. It can only be approximations. And so our physics theory should be an approximation. And our truth, our ideas should be approximations. There can be no, a man is this, a woman is this, a video must have this. To be successful, you need this. No, it's all breakable. We are the makers of the world. We are the world. Think for yourself and figure it out. My name's Kieran McCam. Thank you for watching. I appreciate the views if ever you're watching. I would love for you to subscribe if you can. I get passionate and this energy's got to go somewhere. So if it could come back in the form of a click, if you can move your little finger, I wouldn't mind.
Well, I'm not going to click now. I'm not going to click either.
Have a lovely day though, and take care of yourselves. I'll see you in the next video.
Damn!